So, in our romantic relationships, we are constantly making perceptions of our partner, their actions, what they did, why they did it, and we attribute what they did to certain external and internal factors to make sense of the behaviors of them and what caused it. So, this is called attribution theory. The external factors that we attribute things to are things like, oh, my partner, for example, was late for work because they had a bunch of extra work to do, so they had to stay at work. Or an internal example would be, my partner stayed home from work because they don't want to be around me. And so they decided to stay longer at work. So it's internal reasons versus external reasons. Now, a very, very dangerous thing that happens in romantic relationships all the time is attribution errors. So an attribution error refers to the tendency to attribute the behavior of your partner to their personality or character rather than considering the situational factors that may have been involved in causing their behavior. And this can lead to all sorts of misunderstandings and conflicts in a relationship when attribution errors take place. So, there are many reasons why partners will make attribution errors. One is that it's just easier and quicker to attribute someone's behavior to their personality or character rather than considering all the different factors that could have been involved or influencing their decisions. Another reason is they may have preconceived notions about their partner and can influence their perception of the situation and all sorts of stuff like that. It can also be a way to cope with negative emotions as some sort of a defense mechanism. Like if, let's say, your partner's hurt you, you can say, oh, you did that because you're evil or something like that. So there's many reasons why we can do it, but they're very dangerous and they can really, really hurt relationships. So it is important to learn how to have cooperative verbal communication and to slow down and not make these attribution errors. They can be very dangerous. So mindfulness is something that is very important in relationship. You don't just want to jump in and start communicating about in whatever fashion you want to, because although communication is absolutely necessary for a relationship to function and to just be an abundant, good relationship, you cannot just have destructive communication and dark side communication, like, for example, verbal aggression and stonewalling and all sorts of stuff like that. In fact, a study which is titled "The Role of Mindfulness in Romantic Relationship Satisfaction in Response to Relationship Stress," showed that 2 studies examined the role of mindfulness in romantic relationship and in response to stress, and found that higher mindfulness predicted higher relationship satisfaction and greater capacities to respond constructively to relationship stress. So, it is important to be mindful about the way that you communicate and not just simply communicate just talking and shouting and saying, you did this because you did this, or because you're like this. That is a very destructive way to communicate. Now, one of the important features of communication is that it's not just matching content and matching thoughts and some sort of formula. It's not like a puzzle, but it's very dynamic and it flows. In fact, another study which was looking at the links between psychological and physical aggression and relationship function, found that the least adaptive relationships were the ones that had the most mutually aggressive couples. So it is important that we're mindful about the way we communicate, and it's important that we're adaptive and dynamic in the way that we communicate and ready to change. For example, if you're in a conversation, you don't want to be like just trying to get your points across and try and say just get everything out. It's not some sort of a formula like that. But in reality, you might be in a conversation and thinking, I thought this, but now you explained this, and now I see it this way, and so I've changed my mind. It's very dynamic, and so when you can learn to do that, that is when your romantic relationships will flow. So, one important and valuable tool is the Communistar. This is a perception checking tool which can help you to avoid making attribution errors in your relationship. So, the Communistar has 5 steps: sense, discern, think, feel, want, and do. So these steps pretty much allow you and your partner to slow down, just objectively say what happened, what you saw, not make any sort of prescription or some sort of prescription of what happened, but instead it's saying this is how I saw it, and then you can move on to discern what you felt, how it was going. Then think, you be assertive, you give your direct thoughts, you listen to their thoughts, you feel, you describe just what you are feeling. Not, I feel that you are like this, I feel that you're a bad person. Just, no, like, this hurt me. I felt like you think that you're better than, or that's not correct. I feel that I am sad because I love you, and it hurts me when we're not close. It's just, I'm sad. So you just feel. Then want. You desire for the outcome, how you want the relationship to progress, how you want progression in the relationship. And then do. You make a future commitment to a behavior that you will commit to in order to better the relationship. Now, this is extremely important so that you can simply slow down and not make these detrimental attribution errors, which can lead to just a terrible relationship. So, let me just collect my thoughts real quick. So, there are 2 different amazing strategies for emotional regulation, because at times when you are doing this Communistar, and when you are communicating and maybe you have a little bit of a disagreement, your emotions can be unregulated, and they can kind of go crazy, and they can cause you to make attribution errors and attribute what your partner did for something that is not the actual reason why they did it. So the one important way that you can emotionally regulate in these situations and calm down and have productive and cooperative communication is to cognitively reappraise. So this involves reframing how you interpret the situation to avoid destructive emotional spirals, and you challenge your cognitions, what you just automatically think intentionally and directly. So you might automatically think this person did this because they're selfish and they're rude, but then you think, no, you consciously and intentionally think, no, I could be wrong. I don't know. Perhaps they did that because they saw something that I didn't do. I don't know for sure. I'm not going to make this assumption. Now, another thing that you can do, another strategy for emotional regulation, is learning to accept a moment as a moment or an event. So you just have to accept. You say, okay, this happened, so what? And now what? You decide, you look to the future. You have to be okay with, not necessarily that it was something that was okay that happened if someone treated you poorly, but you have to have peace about it and look towards the future and make change. Now, some other important behaviors that can help with this is to Identify reoccurring behaviors. When I say this, I mean, um, what I'm referring to is attribution errors. So you can identify reoccurring behaviors that trigger emotions that are just painful for you, that maybe are, so if someone has done something to you, you might be thinking, you might have this natural reaction because someone in the past has done that to you and you know things about that person that are negative. So you might have this just feeling of anger and frustration, but you need to slow down and identify those reoccurring emotions and realize, hey, this is a different situation. What else you can do is you can consider ways to communicate that will foster more positive outcomes. You can think, man, if I'm shouting right now, is that gonna facilitate a positive outcome? Is that gonna lead to more productivity and peace? Chances are no. You can choose to communicate in those ways, and you can observe your positive thoughts in how constructive communication affects the relationship. So some forms of problematic listening when you're doing this Communistar and when you're communicating and trying to understand where your partner was coming from is glazing over, just kind of moving past glazing over something your partner says, multitasking, having a lack of energy, and just not really caring, not showing true desire to grow in the relationship. And that is extremely important to not multitask and have your attention on other things, not pseudo listen either, and not selectively listen to just things you want to, but truly listen and show care for the relationship. Take note of different situations that trigger low levels of attention even when they need higher levels. For me personally, my mom can talk a lot about things that I might think are unimportant, but in reality, I know it's my mother and I need to be paying attention to the things she's saying because I love her and she's got amazing wisdom to speak into me. So sometimes I want to say, Mom, get to the point. But instead, what would be better and more uplifting would be to say, hey, Mom, I'm dealing with a lot right now, and you're giving me a lot of information, and I don't want to miss anything important you are saying. I love you, and I care about what you're saying, but my mind can only truly understand and give a quality response to so much information. I have to be honest with you. I love you, so what's the point that you're trying to make at the end of the day? You have to be understanding and explain where you're coming from. Be really cautious about using communication shutdowns and which is just saying that, like, for an example of a communication shutdown would be if your wife asks you, can we please get this for the kids? It'd be awesome to get them new bicycles. So instead of saying, it'll cost too much, it shuts down any future of potentially getting those bikes for the kids in the future, or any just continued conversation. It just says, it'll cost too much, and you shut it down. Instead, you could say something like, we can look at our financial situation and see if it's possible, but for now, it's probably not a wise choice. There's lots of ways to do that. Another communication shutdown is just turning away, walking away, having just bad verbal communication, looking down, arms crossed like this. Nonverbal communication is extremely important. In fact, a study called Nonverbal and Verbal Communication involved in casual relationships among college students found that there's an enormous importance for nonverbal communication cues and behaviors for human romantic relationship, interactions in their romantic relationships. It is extremely important, arguably more important, the way that you communicate nonverbally. So these are extremely important ways that you are able to grow in your communication positively and avoid making attribution errors, but instead cooperatively communicate. The Big Five personality traits are a psychological theory that identify 5 distinct factors as key components of a person's personality. So the first one is openness, which refers to just a person's willingness to experience new things, embrace new ideas. They're generally more imaginative people, open-minded, tend to be artistic and intellectual. The second trait is conscientiousness, which refers to a person's level of responsibility, their diligence, their self discipline. People who have high conscientiousness are often organized, reliable, they tend to be hardworking, and are able to stick to a solid plan. The third trait is extroversionness, which just refers to an individual's level of social engagement and assertiveness. And people who are extroverted often are outgoing, they're energetic, they're confident, they enjoy being around people, they get their energy from them. And yeah, the fourth one is agreeableness, which refers to a person's level of cooperativeness and willingness to just compromise and cooperate. And they tend to value peace and harmony, and they don't like conflict, they avoid conflict. And then finally is neuroticism, which refers to a person's tendency to have negative emotions, experience just anxiety, depression, mood instability. They're often prone to just being worried about themselves and self-conscious and stuff like that. So if people had a better understanding of the Big Five personality traits and how they affect self-disclosure and friendship, then they would have enduringly good friendships. This is because there's a positive correlation between self-disclosure and friendship. Now, a study titled The Role of Self-Disclosure in the Social Construction of Friendship by Katie Christensen explores the connection between self-disclosure and the social construction of the friendship relationship. So the people who participated gave insight as to how friendships are defined and experienced and how self-disclosure changes the dynamic of a friendship. So they did qualitative interviews, and they showed that self-disclosure appears to be a hallmark of friendship and perhaps taken for granted for at times. The study clearly showed that self-disclosure is an important day-to-day interaction with friends, and best friends are socially constructed as individuals who are constantly there for your social support and can be trusted to share intimate details, self-disclosure. So friends have a significant impact on an individual's just sense of identity, self-esteem, and play a pretty significant role in shaping their personality. And self-disclosure allow for a deeper bond to be grown in friendships, according to this study, and just allow for deep, strong friendships. So now that we know that there is a significant correlation between having self-disclosure and good friendships, and we know of the different personality types, why is that important? Well, the reason that is important is because depending on what your personality type is and what traits you are higher and lower in, you will be more or less likely to self-disclose. A second study, different study, by Tara Marshall, Katharina Lefferingen, and Nellie Fergenzi found that extroverts and people who scored higher in openness were far more likely to self-disclose online and update their social medias often. People who scored higher in neuroticism used social media more often, but engaged in emotional disclosure. So these people who were very neurotic, they would still go on social media a lot, but they would not disclose as often. People who scored high in agreeableness often were posting on social media when were more likely to self-disclose than people who were high in neuroticism. and people who scored high in conscientiousness were likely to self-disclose and post safe and appropriate content. So that just shows that a higher level overall of agreeableness and conscientiousness have a positive impact on self-disclosure and through social networking apps, while higher levels of neuroticism have negative impacts on your just chances to self-disclose online and in your relationships in general. So neuroticism is just connected to lower intentions to reveal information, most likely because of fear of other people judging you or damaging your image, your self-image, and just a lack of self-confidence. So self-disclosure is tremendously important. Now, another study, let me just pull it up real quick. Another study highlights the extreme connection between self-disclosure and friendships. This study was titled Self-Disclosure and Friendship by Lily Walker and Paul Wright, and conducted an investigation of the influence of self-disclosure on friendships by manipulating the levels of self-disclosure with 65 same-sex pairs of friends. And the results found that meaningful personal communication is that meaningful personal communication was tremendously important and acted as a social reward in conversation between friends. It also found that women were more likely to be affected by intimate self-disclosure than male friendships. However, after analyzing the men's reaction to intimate self-disclosure, which came up less often than the women, it showed that male friendships were more strongly affected by intimate than non-intimate self-disclosure. So for both people, intimate self-disclosure for men and women is tremendously important for growing in friendships. When partners were willing to interact at highly intimate levels, their bonds grew. So self-disclosure is a tremendously important thing for friendships. And this is beneficial to know that the different personality types will self-disclose at different levels, because let's say you are friends with someone, you meet someone, and you can tell that they are just higher in neuroticism or something like that. You can be more understanding and more patient and realize that, hey, this person, maybe they still do want to be friends with me, but I need to be more patient. I need to build trust with them, and eventually self-disclosure will come. Or maybe if you yourself are high in neuroticism, you might benefit by understanding this, and you could tell a person, hey, I tend to have a harder time with self-disclosure, so don't think I don't want to be friends with you. I just need time to build trust and grow in a deeper relationship. And so, yeah, ways that you can build trust. There's many different ways, but some of the ways to build trust in a relationship is just to be reliable, to being just following through on your commitments, and being honest in everything you do, to being open and transparent. Just sharing your thoughts and feelings can help other people to be more willing to share their thoughts and feelings. Respecting boundaries, being a good listener. All these things are extremely important so that you can build trust and allow for greater self-disclosure in your friendships. So, in conclusion, if people understood the importance of self-disclosure in friendships and how the big 5 personality traits affect self-disclosure, then they would have enduringly good friendships. God bless you and Merry Christmas.